I work at Suma. I've been there about 4 years now, something like that. Um, and some of you will know it. You might know our products, or you might know Suma or people that have worked there as well, and people who've talked about it. And what I want to do now is I want to really kind of talk about how Suma is, give you an overview of how Suma does things a bit differently and what it's like how we kind of make it work, having a democratic workplace where you've kind of got equality and fairness at the heart of how it operates. So I'm just going to give you an overview of it for sort of 15 minutes or so, and then hopefully we'll have time for like a discussion or questions or conversation or whatever. So Suma is an independent wholesaler. We primarily sell organic, vegetarian, natural foods, of which you might have seen us in various different places. We also do a lot of body care and home cleaning products and even vegan dog foods and that kind of stuff, a whole range of different things, but we're mostly about responsibly sourced, sustainable food. That's our product range. We sell to customers all over the UK and in fact around the world, and I'll come to the bit around the world later. And as Joe says, I mean, the most important thing in this is that we're a worker-owned cooperative, and in fact we're the largest worker-owned co-op in the country, which is both exciting and also makes things harder than it could be. And we are also the largest equal pay employer, as far as we know, in Europe, possibly worldwide, who knows. And what that means for us is that everybody gets paid the same hourly rates, regardless of what they do. So whether you're working in the warehouse, whether you're the management accountant, whether you're a driver, whether you're in the canteen, whether you're on the board, whatever you do, we all get paid the same, which introduces sort of a real feeling of equality and fairness across the business. Just to give you a sense of our size, I guess, we're sort of on the cusp of being a large business in business speak. So we have sales of about 63 million. We have 330 employees and we stock around 7,000 product lines. This was last year, and I guess the context for that obviously was a pandemic, which affected all of us in different ways, and Brexit, which affected us in very specific ways and still continues to, actually. So we were founded in 1977. At the time, Margaret Thatcher was the leader of the Tories, not yet in power. The Vietnam War was just coming to an end. Microsoft had 2 employees, a bit bigger now, I guess, a bit bigger than us for sure. And so we started around that time. And I mean, we founded in 1977, and our first sort of warehouse was the Calls in Leeds, which you might know. It's now a pretty trendy part of Leeds. At the time, as far as I know, it was less trendy. It was a sort of working place, and we were founded at that point. And I guess what's interesting about that is in 1977, at the same time as all of that kind of bigger stuff around the war and Thatcher and so on was going on, there was also quite a strong movement of sort of radicalism around co-ops. So there was a big whole food radical co-op movement going on, and we were a part of that movement. And you had a lot of sort of springing up radical worker co-op bookshops and housing co-ops that came out of squats, and a whole kind of radical movement of which Suma was a part of. And so when it was founded, the people that founded it were actually not working in the co-op at the time. They were driving up and down the country delivering things like carpets and random stuff to people, and throwing sacks of lentils on the back of a truck. And that was the way that they were originally distributing whole foods, which were relatively uncommon at the time around the country. And so it sort of emerged from that, really. And so their first warehouse was here in Leeds, where there was a veggie cafe next door, apparently, that was supplied by Suma, and everybody went there for lunch. And that's still kind of tradition now, is everybody's lunch together. which I'll talk about again. So that was sort of in the 1970s, early 80s. About 10 years later, we moved to a larger warehouse in Halifax, and there were quite a few faces on there. Many of which actually have been there a long time, and some people are still there or have only just retired, which is kind of a testament to the fact that it's hard to leave Suma because it's a nice place to work, and it's hard to imagine going to work in a normal place after being here. And now, if you fast forward 40 years or 45 years, we've now got the sort of 300 odd employees. We are based just outside Halifax, and we've got 2 sites there, and we have a distribution centre in London. We have a veggie canteen. We've got where we all get a free veggie 2-course meal every day, various different things. So it's a lovely place to work, and it's quite a buzzy kind of environment, I guess. So that's kind of how we've evolved. I won't say much about this apart from to say we've got a vision which is to demonstrate through our actions that a cooperative business can be successful with a positive environmental and social impact. And I guess the point is that although we're a whole food business that sells stuff, our vision isn't about selling stuff or about whole foods particularly. It's more about being a co-op and trying to be a good example of what a co-op can be. And that's an important factor, really. So a lot of our focus as a business is, of course, on making money because we want to make money, but at the same time, it's trying new things. It's working around things like innovation and cooperation and making sure that we look after our people. So those are the things that really drive us as a business. And underpinning it all are 7 co-op principles, which I'll just talk about a tiny bit because it's kind of important in that we're part of a worldwide co-op movement, and that's how we see ourselves as part of this movement. And that those co-ops worldwide all share these 7 co-op principles. So one is around voluntary and open membership, meaning that everybody has who works at Suma has a chance to become a member of it when that's possible. The second principle around being a co-op is members have democratic control, and at Suma that means that every member has 1 vote. Nobody has more than 1 vote, nobody has fewer, and we all vote on key strategic and important issues, which I'll talk about. The third principle is around economic participation, and that all members have a share in the business, which is a nominal £1 share, and they have a voice and sign off the accounts, budgets, business plans, strategy. The capital is controlled by members. There's a 4th principle around autonomy and independence, which is basically to say that we don't have any shareholders, we don't have any investors, it's the workers that own the business, and it's kind of as simple as that, really. The 5th principle of being a co-op is around education, and historically that was because co-ops were part of the sort of trade union movement, I guess, and they came out of that sort of radical movement where we're trying to make sure that people had a political education and so on. And Suma's a bit like that in that we offer a lot of educational opportunities for people to do MBAs or degrees, or our recruitment is generally based on recruiting people who live nearby and then training them up to do jobs, as opposed to recruiting people for specific jobs who might come from somewhere else. So we support sort of education and training in a local economy and build up skills and things that way. There's a 6th principle of being a co-op, which is around cooperation amongst cooperatives, and we do a lot of work with the wider co-op world. But one thing that is interesting that we do is we give £1 for every member, or every employee rather, so that's £330 a week, to something called the Solid Fund, which is a fund to support other worker co-ops to get started and to get help. And then finally, we have a sort of the 7th principle of being a co-op is around concern for the community. And we have to spend a lot of time sort of working in the local area with food banks or tree planting, or supporting hospices and thinking about the environment, that kind of thing. So we try and structure a lot of our work around these principles, and they guide everything that we do, really. Just a little bit about sort of commercial side. So Suma is a wholesaler. We've got about 7,000 lines of products. Around a quarter of those are from Suma brand products, and we have three brands that we own, I guess. One is our food brand, Suma brand, which is the one most people will see, if you see it at all, which is things like tinned beans and pulses, or cereals, or sauces, or pastas. We do a lot of vegan convenience food. And on the whole of those lines, almost all of them are vegan, although we've got about 30 lines that aren't vegan currently. We have a second brand, which is our Eco Leaf range, which is home cleaning products. And then we've got a third, which is body care. Both of those are sort of, they're all vegan, they're all biodegradable, they're all made with natural products and so on. And just to come back to that customer thing, so we've got quite a wide customer base. We originally started with primarily serving food co-ops, which is groups of people who will bulk buy whole foods and other veggie foods together. And we still have a lot of those in as customers. We serve a lot of independent whole food shops, and those are kind of where we started. We've now got a lot of restaurants and cafes. We sell to quite a few online retailers, and we have large retailers like the Co-op or Able and Cole as well. And we export to over 60 countries, or at least we did. And then things have changed slightly since Brexit, and we paused for a bit with our exports, and we've gradually reopened some, but not all. And that's been it's been quite a hit in some ways as Brexit for us. Okay, so that's kind of how that's what we do. I just want to talk briefly now about how we work and sort of the democratic governance side, because that's what we're here to talk about, I think. So in terms of our governance, this sort of demonstrates, I think, how we work a little bit, but with explanation. So in the middle, we've got the members, and the members are the core thing, really. The members are also the ultimate people who own and control the business, and that's how we work. The ultimate decision-making body is a general meeting, which we have every quarter, which every member attends, and at that we make strategic decisions, like, for example, we'll decide on the strategy, on the business plan, on budgets, or if any major proposals for change come along, we'll discuss and vote on those. So, for example, the last week, so it wasn't a Friday night for some reason. I don't know why. It's like we want to spend our Friday nights talking about stuff. So last Friday night we got together and we agreed that we were going to move premises, or begin a search for new premises in the next 3 or 4 years. So the members make the decisions through the general meetings, but in addition to that, we also have lots of different ways for members to input. So we have surveys, we have forums, we have workshops, we've just introduced a new thing, which is based on, it's like a citizens' assembly or a citizens' jury, where we take a random selection of people, of members, and then we give them plenty of time and lots of information to make recommendations for the rest of the business. And it works for complicated decisions where you don't want people to have to sort of guess at what the right thing is, when you can have more people talk about it in more detail. So that's the core thing, is that the members have all of this input and control, and it's one member, one vote. The members elect the board, and the board, they have the legal responsibilities that come with being running a business. So they are legally the directors of Suma, and they also have the role of making sure that we are delivering as a business on the strategies and plans that we decided as a whole membership. So their job is to make sure we're doing what we said we were going to do at our general meetings. And then we have the member council, who sort of sit in between the members and the board. And the member council, which is, I'm part of that at the moment, is another elected body. And it's a bit like the parliament, I suppose, in that we provide oversight and scrutiny of the board to make sure that they're doing what they're supposed to be doing. And we make sure that members' concerns are heard and they have ample opportunities to feed in. So that's the sort of structure that we have at the moment. It's a relatively uncommon structure generally, and it's particularly uncommon in worker co-ops. And it kind of goes back to the fact that because we're the biggest worker co-op in the country, we often end up facing problems that other worker co-ops probably will face but haven't yet, because we're trying something. So for example, this is quite a new thing, a new structure that we're trying, because it was hard to make our previous structure work with 330 people. So this is a new way of doing things. So we're often trying these kinds of new things. Underneath that, I'm not going to talk about this much, but we have a fairly traditional structure for how we run operations. So we split the business into 3 areas: logistics, services, and commerce. And then we have people and teams that look after particular areas within that. The other thing that is quite distinctive for Suma is the combination of equal pay and multi-skilling. So as I said before, we have an equal pay policy, which means that everybody gets the same hourly rate, which at the moment, is it £15.80 an hour or something? So we have an hourly rate of £15.80 an hour, whatever you do, whether you're whether you're driving a truck, or whether you're doing on member council, or whether you're on the board, or whether you're in the canteen, whatever you do, you get paid the same amount by hour. And we also have multi-skilling, which means that most people in the business will do at least 2 jobs in a week. So for example, I'm on the member council, and that takes about a day and a half, 2 days of my week. And then the rest of the week, I work in the national accounts team, where I work with like the co-op and Lush and Able and Cole and bigger customers to make sure that they're getting the service they need and all that. Other people might be on the board some of the time, in the warehouse, other parts of the week. The management accountant, our management accountant, he works 3.5 days a week, and then the other day and a half he drives the North Wales run, which is probably quite a welcome break from staring at the screen. So we kind of mix it up, and I think the important thing is that equal pay works when you've got multi-skilling, because if you've got people who are specialized in a particular role and that's all they do, it's very hard for people to, it's harder to justify the equal pay, or it's easier for people to say, well, I should be paid more because this is the market rate. But if you do that 3 days a week, but the other 2 days you do something else, then there's much more argument to say, well, we pay everyone the same, and everyone just mixes in and does the jobs that needs to be done. And it works really well, and it kind of goes to the heart of the ethos of Suma, I guess. It also means that when we come to the gender pay gap reporting, which is a legal requirement for a business of our size at least, then when we report, we can report a 0% pay gap, because everybody gets paid the same. So there's no gender pay gap whatsoever, which is a really nice feature. It's also worth saying that whenever we look at the figures, although I haven't done it this year, but whenever we've looked at the figures in the past, the number of women who are in responsible roles, so for example, coordinator roles or on the board, it's always far higher. There's a far higher percentage of women than men in responsible roles or on the board, which is part of that whole gender pay gap reporting information. And then the final thing I was just going to say was, I think I've made the point that co-op, we see ourselves as part of the wider co-op world, and there's I guess we're part of this cooperative economy. So this is some figures published last year by Cooperatives UK, which is the national trade body for co-ops, and they find their data shows there are 7,000 odd independent co-ops in the UK. They employ around 250,000 people. Together they turn over around 40 billion, and there are around 14 million members of those co-ops, and we're kind of part of that sector, and that's an important part. Interestingly, when you look at those figures, actually about 2/3 of the turnover and the employees are from 2 businesses, John Lewis and the co-op, and then there's about 40 or 50 medium-sized businesses, of which Suma is one. And then there's a really, really large amount of very small or micro enterprises that make up the other 7,000 or so. But so we're kind of part of that. And as the largest worker co-op, I guess we have a role in being a voice for the worker co-op sector to some extent within that, although there's lots of really interesting people out there doing interesting things as well, as some of you might know, around the co-op world. So yeah, we're part of that world. And that, I think that kind of brings me to a close really, and maybe it'd be interesting to hear what people think, or if they've got thoughts, or if they've got experiences of being in co-ops elsewhere, because, you know, obviously it's a relatively small part of the economy in the business world, but at the same time, it's one that is interesting and people have lots of different experiences of. So yeah, thank you. And I'll just hand back to Joe now for questions and any discussion.
Thank you very much, Giles. That was absolutely fascinating. I hadn't appreciated the range of, well, the sheer number of the co-ops as well across the country. Now, if people have got any questions, if they would like to raise their hands, then I can go to you directly and you can unmute and ask your question, or if you'd prefer to do it anonymously, if you want to drop me a question into the chat, and I will ask it on your behalf. We have already had one question that came in, which was to do with the use of, well, it links, I think, to a broader environmental theme of, does Suma actually use things like plastics, or are you actively trying to take that out of your business at the moment?
Both, really. I mean, it's one of the, I was going to talk about this, but didn't, so it's good you've asked. I mean, one thing that we do find is a real challenge is that the wholesaling distribution world is really reliant on plastic and on diesel, and it's kind of part of what of how it operates at the moment. So things come wrapped in plastic, in order to keep them safe and not get broken on the way and avoid food waste and all that kind of thing. And obviously, trucks generally take diesel. So we are actively changing it and challenging it. So, but it's hard, and it's hard when you are relatively small. You know, we've not got a huge amount of money to spend. So we have done various different things. So, for example, with on particular products like toilet roll, they come wrapped in paper rather than in plastic. And with our bags of seeds and nuts, they come in recycled plastic. When we are sourcing products, rather than coming in, like when you get 12 tins, they come wrapped in a box wherever possible now, rather than in plastic. So we are trying to reduce that. And we did a sort of calculation on the use of tape in our warehouse, where we worked out that I think we used 43,000 meters of sellotape in something like 2018. And then we switched to paper tape in 2019, and obviously saved all that. So we are trying to do that, but it's hard work. And the reality is that probably without, I think probably relying on individual businesses to try and make the change, especially when they're relatively small in the world, and part of a bigger supply chain is going to be a hard ask that will take a long time and probably requires more centralized action, I would suggest, if that helps as an answer.
Yes, and in linking to that, then who frames those decisions? Who sort of says, right, here's a proposal we want you to vote on? Does it come from the board, or does it come from the members as, hey, we should be doing this, and up to the board as to work out how it happens?
It can be both. I mean, it can be that the board makes proposals to vote on. So, for example, around plastics, It tends to be not. It tends to be that on the whole, the decisions would come from, if you were to take plastics as an example, there was a decision taken a while ago before I was at Suma to try out a new recyclable plastic in some of our products. And that was suggested by the sort of product development team, who said we should do this. And then it was taken to the general meeting, and basically they said, this is a bit of a risk and it's going to cost a lot of money and we don't know if it's going to work. Shall we try it? And they said, yes, let's try it. And actually it didn't work. But we did try it. So it came from the people, but it doesn't necessarily, the people who are doing the work, but it doesn't necessarily have to be. It could be that the proposal comes from the board. It could come either way.
And it's very similar question. It's slightly more detailed. Is that somebody has asked is how Suma informs their members in the decision-making process. Do you use an integrated reporting framework? And the example here is given as GRI, which I'm sorry I'm not familiar with, but others may be.
Well, that is such a good question. The honest answer is we don't have a formal process at the moment. And a lot of this comes back to the fact, like I said earlier, that we're sort of trying things out a lot of the time, because we are because we're the sort of largest worker cohort, we often are addressing things for the first time. And because we're really stretched, we don't have a team of people who can go off and research this kind of stuff. So no, we don't have a particularly integrated reporting framework of any kind. I don't even know what GRI is, but it sounds like it could be just the thing. So it's things like that that we actually could really do with, because we manage all of this stuff. But I think there are probably processes out there that we could use that would be much better. So yeah, thanks. I'm going to look that up.
So does it actually take you a long time then to make your decisions?
Sometimes not at all. I mean, the way that we tend to communicate for decision making is like, and if I was to take the example of the run up to the last general meeting, which was a couple of weeks ago, we had two decisions. So one decision was a relatively small one, and so we distributed as much information as we could for why we might want to follow a particular proposal, what the pros and cons were, a sort of business case for it. And then we allow people to absorb that. And then we have a week of meetings and forums where people can drop in for an hour and just chat about it with the board, member council, finance people, whoever is there. So it'll often be like 30 people will talk about it for an hour. And then when we get to the GM, it's possible to have a vote that's relatively well informed. Whereas on a larger thing, so for example, around the decision on whether we should move premises, we would do it slightly differently. And we ran a sort of 6-month process of surveys, forums, discussions, randomly selected citizens, jury type things, until we got to the GM, at which point most people will have had a chance to both talk about it and learn about it. And so when the decision came, we had half an hour of discussion at the actual meeting, but a decision was possible because we'd kind of done it to death, I guess, and people understood it. But we don't have anything more formal at the moment. No.
And how do you deal with somebody has asked that a democratic decision making can mean that large minorities are disappointed because they lose the debate essentially. So what strategies do you tend to use to avoid avoid that happening, or to help people understand why the decision has been made?
It's a mix of things, I suppose. I mean, I think because it's a relative, although it's a relatively small organization, normally people are happy to go with the decision. So, once the decision has been made, there might be a small number of people who are, really annoyed that the decision didn't go their way and find it hard to accept. But on the whole, people are at Suma because they believe in democratic decision making. And if the decision doesn't go their way, they tend to go, well, it didn't go my way this time, but it has done in the past. That's how it works. And then after that, there's often a bit of discussion about how it's implemented. So even if we reach a decision that might have a small minority of people that are kind of a bit annoyed by the thing, they may then be engaged afterwards in how we make it happen and how we can kind of address some of their concerns if they have concerns that still continue. So it hasn't actually been such a big deal, and maybe that's what's different from like a large scale democracy in the wider world. You don't have that sort of interconnection between people, so people aren't able to talk about it and see each other, and they don't really know who's been affected by a decision, so they can just be genuinely pissed off at the world. Whereas it's harder to be that when you're at Suma, because you're being pissed off at your friend, and people don't do that so much.
No, true. There's more connection there, isn't there? So in terms of the model that you use then, how does it benefit the workers in your supply chain as well from being a member of a co-op? Particularly, the question is that wondering how you source responsibly from a human perspective. For example, avoiding modern day slavery and minimizing racial pay gaps.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question, and it's quite a big issue, and actually that's part of one of the conversations that's ongoing at the moment is about ethical policy and how we make that work. I suppose we have two different approaches to it. So we have Suma brand, which is our own products, and on that we are much more thorough on sort of ethical supply chain. So we have our own questionnaires and policies. We do visits, so we make sure that we're much more certain of ethical supply chain and avoiding modern day slavery, etc. in that side. Whereas on the other, for the brands that we wholesale but aren't responsible for, we have to take their word for it. So I suppose there is a difference in that. And when it comes to Suma brand, I mean, what we do try, where we can, we would try to source from co-ops. So for example, our coconut milk and our jackfruit are sourced from a farmer co-op in Sri Lanka, which is owned by the farmers, and they do the whole process. So they not only grow the stuff, but they also can it and box it and everything. So it allows us to have more opportunity to give farmer co-ops and those people who are doing producers more power and pay in the supply chain. But it's not easy, again, and I think the only way that our model differs is that we spend more time probably actively trying to find those kinds of suppliers. But there are, and there's more that we could be done. And then we, as I say, one of the things that we are talking about at the moment is how we might invest more in supply chains. So we might support cooperative supply chains further down the line, so that we could be more sure of the ethics and of the products that we get. I mean, another thing I would add on that actually is that we have a supplier in Italy, which has pasta supplier, which is also a cooperative. It's a farmer cooperative, and we have invested quite a lot in a factory so that the pasta that is produced there then grown there, is taken to the factory and produced, and that has created a sort of a worker cooperative supply chain. So you've got the farmer co-op, then you've got a worker co-op that produces it, then you've got us as a worker co-op, and then we sell it here. But it's a really interesting and big question.
And we've got a couple of questions on sort of the workforce, and the comment that the equal pay status, etc., is fascinating. Do you find that you attract certain types of people because you're a co-op? And if so, are there any downsides to that?
It's a really good question. I mean, I thought so. You know, when I went there, I thought, oh my God, it's just going to be full of middle-class people like me who like democracy and Whole Foods and stuff. But actually, it's not really like that at all. And I think it's because more than anything, we're a local employer, I suppose. We're not, so we do attract people who are kind of drawn to the idea of democracy, but we more than anything, we're a warehouse who employs people locally. And so we sort of have two levels of workers. So most people who work at Suma are members, but we do have a fixed term. We have a group of people who are fixed term workers who will come to work for us for 18 months. And either they will stay and become members, or they will not, and they'll have 3 months off, and then they might come back again for another 18-month contract. And so a lot of the people that are in our membership have come through that route. So they aren't people who have gone, who would like to work for an ethical place, although we do have those people too. A lot of people are thought, oh, I'd like to work there. It sounds like a really interesting place to work. You get paid well. I might have to give a bit more than your average job, but I'd like to be there. So it's actually quite a mixed place to work, and it isn't as I anticipated it would be when I first went there. If that helps.
Yes, sorry, I was just trying to find my unmute button. So do you find then that with your workforce you've got happier workers, and sort of is that reflected in things like the number of sick days taken? Do you have a way of recording worker happiness in that sense?
Do you know, we don't really record worker happiness, although we do talk about it quite a lot. And I think there's a couple of reasons. I mean, we once did, this is just an example of why we don't, but we once did, we stuck on the wall like a worker of the month on the wall. Somebody thought that'd be a nice idea to sort of reward people. And people were up in arms about how ridiculous it was, like how stupid it was to have such a thing as a worker of a month, because we all work really hard and everybody does stuff. And just because somebody says you're the worker of the month doesn't mean it's right, and all that kind of thing. It's just an example of people, I think at Suma, are a bit skeptical of probably even the concept of like worker of the month or employee happiness and that kind of thing. And I guess if we were to measure it, I think probably what we'd measure is engagement or involvement in decision making. So, you know, there are groups of people, or there are people who are just disillusioned or annoyed and they don't want to be involved in the decision making because they're just fed up with the whole thing or whatever. And I think, but most people aren't like that. Most people are very engaged in discussions, and they attend the forums and they read the packs and the minutes of the information. And I think probably if we were to measure anything, we'd probably measure engagement. And we do measure engagement, but we don't sort of report it in the same way that you might report worker happiness. And I don't know, it'd be interesting to do with work happiness, because although I think we probably got a larger number of people who are kind of annoyed than happy, but that's not because they don't like working at Suma, because they've probably been there for like 25 years and they've not gone because there's nowhere better to go. It's just that they have really strong views and they care. And so happiness probably isn't the way that they would, or we would frame it. We'd have to frame it differently. But I don't know how we do that, or who would ever have the time to do it.
Well, that sort of links neatly segues into the next question, which is, do you actually have you linked up with any universities to carry out research or small projects that would look at the ways of co-op working and the advantages and disadvantages, and perhaps also the different models that you were talking about earlier as to which ones work at which scale for what sort of companies?
As far as I know, we haven't, but I think we would really love to. And that might be the way of addressing some of these sort of gaps in our time, knowledge, etc. So yeah, I think we'd be really up for it. I know that we have had colleagues or co-op members who have gone off and somebody's doing an MBA at the moment, and their focus is around how to do project management in a cooperative way. And quite a few of our HR people have done HR qualifications, or an MA, for example, that has focused on cooperative approaches to HR. But I don't think we've particularly teamed up with universities to allow university researchers to come and research us. But I think we'd be really up for it, because I think we could learn a lot from it. Because probably we're making up a lot of stuff that we don't need to, quite honestly.
Well, there you go. That's an open invitation to anyone in the audience who wants to get in
I'm
touch.
sure we'd be up for it. Yeah.
Which would be great. So I think I've gone through a huge range of the questions that were asked. If anyone has anything else they want to ask or to add or to comment on, do you want to put it into the chat, or do you want to raise your hand using the reactions button at the bottom of your screen? No, I think we've given everyone so much food for thought. They're chewing on that. But so I think, yeah, I think it just remains for me to thank Giles very much for his extremely interesting talk today, and to say that if as he said, if you want to get in touch to do any research with Suma, then drop an email to sustainability@york.ac.uk. I can put you in touch. And so it just leaves me to say thank you very much. There are various applause reactions going around, so thank you, Giles, for that. For those of you who are interested, we have a range of other talks that are going on as part of One Planet Week this week. So if you want to look on our web pages, if you follow the bit.ly link that's on the slide just here, bit.ly/OPW22, watch out, it's case sensitive, then there are a range of other talks on our theme of equity in a local economy this week. But I'll just leave you saying thank you very much to Giles, and thank you very much to all of you for attending.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you. Bye.
That was great. Thank you, Giles. That was really fascinating.
Was that all right? It's always really hard to tell, you know, when you're staring at me. You don't know.
It is. It's very difficult to judge on Zoom, I'm afraid. But there were a lot of questions on chat, which was lovely, and a really interesting range of comments about it. So yeah, no, I think that was really, really good. So I'm going to put the recording onto our YouTube channel as soon as I get the chance, and I'll drop you a link to it when I do. But other than that, thank you very much for your time.
Yeah, thank you. If you do get people who say, "Oh, that was interesting, I'd be interested in finding out more about this or doing some research," then do just point them, give them my email, and get in touch. Because we could definitely benefit from that. I think it'd be really interesting.
Yes, I could see a really interesting dissertation topic coming up for for an undergraduate, or as you say, a research topic for an MSc maybe.
Yeah, yeah, me too, definitely. Yeah,
that would be great.
Right.
Okay, thank you ever so much.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye bye.
Cheers then. Thanks, Rhiannon.
Thanks, Rhiannon. Bye.
Bye.